All right, fight fans, welcome back to the Final Bell Boxing Podcast. I'm Mike Hastings, and today we are diving deep into the life of one of the most infamous and fascinating figures in boxing history, Mike Tyson. You know him as Iron Mike, the youngest heavyweight champion ever, a man whose power, speed, and ferocity changed boxing forever. But today, we're going to go beyond the headlines and the knockout reels. We're going to explore the boy from Brooklyn, the troubled teen, the fighter who became a global icon, and the lessons we can all learn from his life. And as always, before we jump in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a single episode of the Final Bell Boxing Podcast. Trust me, you do not want to miss this journey. So let's rewind to Mike Tyson's childhood. Born June 30, 1966 in Brooklyn, New York, Mike's early life was anything but easy. He grew up in the Brownsville neighborhood, an area notorious for crime, poverty, and rough streets. Tyson's upbringing was marked by instability. His father left when he was very young, and his mother passed away when Mike was just 16. That kind of early loss shapes you. And for Mike, it meant learning to fend for himself at an age when most kids are still figuring out school and homework. From a very young age, Tyson was drawn into the streets. He got into fights, stole, and quickly developed a reputation as a tough kid who wasn't afraid of anyone. Teachers and social workers described him as bright, intelligent, but extremely volatile. He was angry, frustrated, and often misunderstood. But underneath all that was a boy searching for direction, identity, and a way to channel his energy. It was around the age of 12 or 13 that Mike's life began to take a dramatic turn. While in trouble with the law, he was sent to Tryon School for Boys, a reform school where he met people who would change his path. And most importantly, it was there that he was introduced to boxing in a serious way. A juvenile detention worker named Bobby Stewart recognized Tyson's raw power and athletic ability. Stewart was a former boxer and immediately saw potential in Mike. He began teaching him the fundamentals of boxing, footwork, basic punches, and, perhaps most importantly, discipline. Then came the man who would define Mike Tyson's early career, Cus D'Amato. D'Amato was more than a trainer. He was a mentor, a father figure, and a psychological guide. He recognized Tyson's potential not just physically, but mentally. Cus taught Mike the peekaboo style, a defensive yet aggressive system that allowed Tyson to unleash devastating combinations while protecting himself. But even more than that, Cus taught Mike about mindset, focus, and controlling his anger. Mike often credits Cus with saving his life and guiding him toward greatness. There's an incredible story about Tyson's first meeting with D'Amato. Cus saw a small, angry kid with incredible physical ability and a fiery spirit. Most people would see trouble. Cus saw unrealized potential. He took Mike under his wing, often comparing him to a young warrior in training. That mentorship shaped everything: how Tyson fought, how he approached life, and how he handled adversity. Tyson's amateur career took off quickly. By the age of 14 or 15, he was already winning tournaments in New York, demonstrating a power and aggression that made him stand out immediately. People would watch him in the gym and say, "That kid hits harder than anyone I've ever seen." And they weren't exaggerating. Even in youth bouts, Tyson's ferocity was unmatched. He had a unique ability to intimidate opponents before even throwing a punch. That psychological aspect, learned from Cus, became a defining feature of his career. But it wasn't all easy. Mike's early life was riddled with challenges. Growing up in a tough neighborhood, losing his mother, and dealing with the pressures of early fame in the boxing world. These were immense burdens for a teenager. And yet, boxing gave him structure. It gave him a way to channel anger, a sense of purpose, and a path to something bigger than himself. Every punch, every round, every bout was a step away from the streets and toward destiny. Let's talk a bit about Tyson's personality as a young fighter. Even as a teen, he had a magnetic presence. Trainers, fellow fighters, and fans described him as intimidating, even terrifying, but also intelligent and curious. He was a thinker in the ring, studying opponents, learning from mistakes and absorbing lessons like a sponge. Off the canvas, though, he was still a kid dealing with trauma, searching for guidance and learning how to trust. Cus D'Amato provided that guidance, teaching Mike not just about boxing, but about life, respect, and focus. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, Tyson was already gaining attention on the national stage, winning amateur titles, dominating youth bouts, and developing a reputation as a prodigy. People started to say, this kid might be something special. And they were right. But it wasn't just about talent. Mike's story teaches us that talent alone isn't enough. Discipline, mentorship, and heart are what transform potential into greatness. There are also stories about Tyson's childhood that illustrate his dual nature. On one hand, a loving, loyal kid who cared deeply for those close to him. On the other, a boy with a fiery temper who could explode at any slight. That duality stayed with him throughout his career, sometimes fueling his victories, sometimes leading to controversies. And that complexity is part of what makes Tyson's story so compelling. As we wrap up this first section, it's important to remember that Mike Tyson's early life was foundational to everything that came after. The hardships, the anger, the mentorship, the structure, and the love of Cus D'Amato all converged to create a fighter who would change the world. Tyson's childhood was not just a prelude. It was the engine that drove his future success, the lessons and experiences that forged a champion, and ultimately the start of a story that is both inspiring and cautionary. Next, in Section 2, we're going to dive into Tyson's professional rise, his key fights, how he became the youngest heavyweight champion in history, and the ferocity that made him a global superstar. We'll relive the knockouts, the media frenzy, and the moments that cemented his place in boxing history. And remember, fight fans, if you're enjoying this deep dive, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You do not want to miss what's coming next in the Mike Tyson story.
We hope you are enjoying our podcast. If you'd like to help us continue to provide you quality content, we would welcome your generosity. In the comments section, we have a link to make a donation. Every £1 we receive will help us bring you dynamic and reliable sporting content. Thank you in advance for making the effort for us. £1 in isolation is very little, but every pound added together adds up to a substantial contribution to us. So don't be shy, click the link and donate £1 today. Thank you for your support. Now back to the podcast.
Welcome back, fight fans, to the Final Bell Boxing Podcast. If you're just tuning in, we've already explored Mike Tyson's early life, his tough upbringing in Brooklyn, and the mentorship that transformed him from a troubled teen into a focused fighter. Now, it's time for the part most of you have been waiting for: Iron Mike in the professional ring, and the rise of a legend who would change boxing forever. So let's jump right in. Mike Tyson turned professional in 1985 at just 18 years old. And let me tell you, right from his debut, it was clear this kid was unlike anyone else. Tyson had raw power, blinding speed, and an aggressiveness that left opponents reeling. People would come into the ring thinking they were facing another young prospect, and leave barely able to lift their gloves. His early fights were mostly in the United States, where he quickly started building a reputation as a knockout machine. By the time Tyson had fought 9 professional bouts, he had already knocked out every single opponent. That's right, 9 fights, 9 knockouts. That kind of destructive power, especially at such a young age, got the boxing world's attention fast. And it wasn't just the knockouts, it was the way he carried himself. Tyson had an aura of intimidation. Even before the bell rang, opponents felt the pressure. One of Tyson's first big tests came against Trevor Berbick in 1986 for the WBC heavyweight title. Tyson was just 20 years old and Berbick was a seasoned pro, a former champion who many expected to dominate. But Tyson didn't just win. He obliterated Berbick in the second round, becoming the youngest heavyweight champion in history at 20. That fight wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. Mike Tyson was here, and he was a force of nature. Now, let's talk about Tyson's fighting style, because that's part of what made him so special. He employed the peekaboo style taught by Cus D'Amato, which combined tight defense with explosive offense. Tyson would bob, weave, and slip punches while staying dangerously close to his opponent. Then, in a flash, he would unleash a flurry of hooks and uppercuts that could end a fight in seconds. Watching Tyson in his prime was like watching a panther stalking its prey, every movement calculated, every punch devastating. After Berbick, Tyson defended his title against some of the toughest fighters of the era: James "Bonecrusher" Smith, Tony Tucker, Larry Holmes, and Michael Spinks. Each fight showcased not just his power but his mental game. Tyson's ability to intimidate opponents before they even stepped into the ring became legendary. With Spinks, for example, the fight was over in 91 seconds, a total knockout. Fans around the world were in awe, and Tyson became a global superstar seemingly overnight. Tyson wasn't just a knockout artist. He was also a student of psychology in the ring. Cus D'Amato taught him how to analyze opponents, exploit weaknesses, and use fear as a weapon. Opponents often said they felt Tyson's presence before the first punch. That combination of skill, speed, and intimidation made him a nightmare for the heavyweight division. But Tyson's rise wasn't just about fights. It was also about media and cultural attention. By the late 1980s, Tyson was more than a boxer. He was a global phenomenon. Magazine covers, talk shows, interviews, you name it. People were fascinated by his story. The boy from Brooklyn who overcame poverty, violence, and chaos to become the most feared man in the world. Tyson's persona was magnetic, and he captured the imagination of fans both inside and outside boxing. One of Tyson's defining traits was his discipline and focus under Cus D'Amato's guidance. D'Amato emphasized mental toughness, visualization, and controlling emotions. Tyson took these lessons to heart. Even in the high-pressure environment of world championship fights, he remained composed, calculated, and explosive when needed. That discipline, combined with his natural gifts, created a perfect storm in the ring. Let's talk about some of Tyson's most iconic fights. Larry Holmes, 1988. Holmes was a former champion and a highly respected fighter. Tyson dismantled him with precision and power, showcasing the peak of his abilities. Michael Spinks, 1988. Spinks was unbeaten and considered a top contender. Tyson ended the fight in just 91 seconds, a performance that stunned the boxing world and cemented his status as the undisputed heavyweight champion. Tony Tucker, 1987. A challenging bout that Tyson dominated, demonstrating both technical skill and strategic thinking in addition to raw power. Each of these fights highlighted not just Tyson's knockout ability, but his ring IQ, mental toughness, and strategic approach. He wasn't just a brawler, he was a thinking fighter, capable of adapting to opponents mid-fight and exploiting every weakness. Tyson's training regimen was another key part of his success. Cus D'Amato's methods were intense: long road work, heavy sparring, meticulous diet, and psychological preparation. Tyson trained like a machine. Hours in the gym every day, refining punches, combinations, defense, and footwork. His physical conditioning, combined with his ferocity, made him nearly unstoppable. As Tyson's fame grew, he also became a symbol of raw power and fearlessness. Fans idolized him, younger fighters wanted to emulate him. But fame also brought pressure and scrutiny. Every fight, every public appearance, every word was analyzed. Tyson was no longer just a fighter. He was an icon, representing both the glory and the chaos of the sport. Of course, Tyson's rise was not without controversy. His personal life, relationships with the media, and later legal issues added layers of complexity to his story. But in this section, we're focusing on the rise, the dominance, and the sheer impact of Tyson as a professional fighter. His career in the late 1980s and early 1990s was a perfect storm of talent, mentorship, strategy, and raw, unrelenting power. By the early 1990s, Tyson had become undisputed heavyweight champion, holding the WBC, WBA, and IBF titles. He had a global fan base, record-breaking pay-per-view numbers, and an aura that made him a near-mythical figure in boxing. He inspired awe, fear, and admiration, not just for his punches, but but for the legend he was becoming. And while his professional dominance is well documented, what's often overlooked is the emotional and psychological toll of rising to the top so quickly. Tyson was still a young man, thrust into global stardom, trying to navigate wealth, fame, and personal identity. Those pressures, combined with the intense expectations of the boxing world, would later play a role in the challenges he faced. But in this section, we celebrate his incredible rise and dominance. So to recap Section 2, Tyson's professional career skyrocketed from his debut in 1985 to becoming the youngest heavyweight champion at 20. His unique style, knockout power, psychological mastery, and global stardom made him a phenomenon unlike anything boxing had ever seen. He was Iron Mike, feared, admired, and unstoppable. Next, in Section 3, we'll explore the challenges, controversies, personal struggles, and lessons from Tyson's life outside the ring. We'll talk about resilience, reinvention, and the human side of one of boxing's most iconic figures. And we'll close with reflections on his legacy and the lessons we can all learn from Iron Mike's extraordinary life. And remember, fight fans, if you're loving this deep dive, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss the final part of this Mike Tyson special.
We hope you are enjoying our podcast. If you'd like to help us continue to provide you quality content, we would welcome your generosity. In the comments section, we have a link to make a donation. Every £1 we receive will help us bring you dynamic and reliable sporting content. Thank you in advance for making the effort for us. £1 in isolation is very little, but every pound added together adds up to a substantial contribution to us. So don't be shy, click the link and donate £1 today. Thank you for your support. Now back to the podcast.
Welcome back, fight fans, to the final part of our Mike Tyson special here on the Final Bell Boxing Podcast. If you've been following along, we've already covered Tyson's turbulent childhood, his rise under Cus D'Amato's guidance, and his explosive professional career. Now, we're going to dig into the human side of Iron Mike, the challenges, setbacks, lessons learned, and the incredible legacy that still inspires millions today. Let's be clear, Tyson's story isn't just about knockouts and championships. It's also about struggles, some very public, some deeply personal. As a young man suddenly thrust into global stardom, Tyson faced pressures that few could even imagine. Fame, money, media scrutiny, and personal relationships all created challenges that would test him in ways the ring never could. One of the first major personal challenges Tyson faced was his legal troubles. In the early 1990s, he was convicted of rape and sentenced to prison. It was a shocking moment for fans worldwide. Tyson himself has spoken about this period as a turning point in his life, a time of reflection, isolation, and forced maturity. While the circumstances were tragic and controversial, the experience gave him perspective and a chance to reevaluate his priorities, relationships, and identity outside the ring. Tyson's time in prison wasn't easy, but it also set the stage for comebacks later in his career. He returned to the ring in 1995 with a renewed focus, reclaiming titles and proving that even after major setbacks, he could rise again. Those comebacks weren't just physical, they were mental and emotional, showing resilience that many fans didn't realize existed. Tyson had to rebuild not only his career, but his sense of self, and he did it with determination and grit. Another challenge Tyson faced was personal and emotional turmoil. Losing his mother at 16 had a profound effect on him, and the pressures of fame sometimes amplified feelings of anger, isolation, and confusion. Tyson has been open about mental health struggles, bouts of depression, and moments of self-doubt. And yet, he never let those struggles define him entirely. Instead, he sought outlets, boxing, acting, philanthropy, to channel emotions productively. Tyson's marriages and relationships also made headlines. He experienced heartbreak, public scrutiny, and personal lessons that shaped him as a person. These experiences, while difficult, contributed to his depth and complexity as a human being. They reminded fans that behind the power, ferocity, and knockout reels was a man learning, growing, and navigating life in real time. But here's the part that really stands out: Tyson's ability to redefine himself. After the ups and downs of his early career, he transitioned into new ventures. He became an actor, appeared in documentaries, hosted podcasts, and embraced pop culture in a way that few former athletes have. He shared his story openly, humorously, and sometimes painfully honestly, giving fans insight into the man behind the legend. His openness helped others relate to him, not just as a fighter, but as a person who had faced adversity, mistakes, and redemption. Tyson also became a mentor and inspiration to younger fighters and fans around the world. He spoke openly about his training, mindset, and lessons learned from Cus D'Amato. He encouraged discipline, respect, and mental toughness, emphasizing that boxing is as much about character as it is about punches. Younger fighters, from pros in the heavyweight division to amateurs in gyms worldwide, often cite Tyson as a source of inspiration, not only for his skill, but for his story of resilience and reinvention. Let's talk for a moment about Tyson's health and personal transformation in recent years. He's embraced fitness, wellness, and personal development, showing fans that it's never too late to make positive changes. He became a vegetarian for a time, practiced meditation, and explored spiritual and mental health practices. Tyson's evolution reminds us that growth doesn't stop at any age, and that even the most intimidating figures in the world are capable of reflection and transformation. And of course, Tyson's legacy is monumental. He changed boxing with his style, his ferocity, and his presence. His peekaboo technique, combination speed, and knockout power inspired countless fighters. Names like Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, and Mike's modern-day successors all acknowledge the influence Tyson had on the sport. But beyond boxing, Tyson became a cultural icon, appearing in movies, TV shows, and even on stage, bringing his story to new audiences worldwide. Tyson's journey is also a lesson in human complexity. He's been a champion, a controversial figure, a fallen icon, and a redeemed man. Fans can learn from both his triumphs and mistakes, that resilience matters, that mistakes can teach lessons, and that reinvention is always possible. Tyson's life shows that even when the world seems against you, discipline, reflection, and heart can lead to transformation. Before we close, it's important to note that Mike Tyson's story also reminds us of the support systems behind every great fighter. Mentors like Cus D'Amato, family, and friends provided guidance and care during the toughest moments. Tyson's relationships, mentorship, and community are part of what allowed him to endure and thrive, despite the immense pressures of life and fame. So, as we wrap up this special, let's reflect on the lessons from Iron Mike. Resilience in the face of setbacks. The importance of mentorship and guidance. Mental toughness and discipline. Transformation and personal growth. Using life experiences, both good and bad, to inspire others. Tyson's story is a reminder that greatness is never linear. It's full of highs, lows, victories, losses, mistakes, and lessons. And through it all, he remains one of boxing's most iconic figures, a man whose life continues to inspire, entertain, and teach. Finally, fight fans, we want to take a moment to send our thoughts, kind wishes, and prayers to Mike Tyson and his family. Behind the headlines, the fights, and the controversies, Tyson is human. His journey has been remarkable, complex, and transformative, and our hearts are with him and those close to him. To all of our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Mike Tyson's life and career. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode of the Final Bell Boxing Podcast. Tyson taught us that with heart, discipline, and resilience, anything is possible. Whether you're stepping into a ring or facing challenges in your own life, there's a lesson in Iron Mike's story for all of us. Until next time, fight fans, keep your gloves up, your heart strong, and never forget the lessons from one of boxing's greatest legends, Mike Tyson.